As of right now, we are living in the third industrial revolution where everything is computerized and technology is growing exponentially. However, what if all of a sudden this stops? What if we get catapulted back in time to a world that is still fighting with swords and bows and arrows? This may sound impossible, but this actually happened about 75 years ago during the start of World War II. Germany was a technological powerhouse that invented many futuristic weapons such as jet-powered aircraft, advanced tanks, and even rocket-propelled missiles. Yet despite having this advanced technology, they lost the war. So how did this happen? And what can we learn from it? Well, in today's video, we are going to be doing our best to answer these questions and find out what would happen if we got stuck in World War III. So stay tuned. World War III would be a war unlike any other. With the current technology at our fingertips, weapons have become so advanced that it could very well take just one single strike to obliterate the entire planet. This raises an interesting question. What if World War III started, but instead of being equipped with the latest technology, you were born into a time period where warfare was still done with bows and arrows? How would you survive, and what would your role be in the war? To help us better understand this scenario, let's first look at what life was like when the Third World War actually began. Prior to World War II, Germany was considered to be one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world. In fact, their advancements in many areas were so impressive that many people believe that Germany won World War I despite losing it. You see, World War I completely drained the German economy, and by the time the dust had settled, there was no doubt that Germany was left weak and desperate for change. This caused many Germans to feel humiliated and resentful towards the Treaty of Versailles, which forced them to give up territory and accept blame for the war. As a result, citizens yearned for a strong leader who could restore Germany to its former glory. And that's when Adolf Hitler came along. He promised to rebuild the country, restore its economy, and strengthen its military. And as a result, the German people elected him chancellor and gave him the power to do as he pleased. However, one of the first things Hitler did was break the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. He quickly began to expand the German military, build new weapons, and prepare for war. Even though this was strictly forbidden, no one stopped him. Why? Because by this point, the rest of Europe was preoccupied with the Great Depression. At the time, the entire world economy was collapsing, and everyone was too focused on themselves to worry about what Germany was up to. And that gave Hitler all the time he needed to secretly build up his military, until he felt confident enough to start World War II. But as we know, despite having some of the most advanced weapons in the world, Germany ended up losing the war. So what does this tell us? Well, it shows us that sometimes it doesn't matter how advanced your weapons are or how powerful your army is, because there are always outside factors that can influence the outcome of a war. So what if we found ourselves in a similar situation where we had some of the most advanced weapons in the world, but for some reason we're forced to use primitive weapons to fight our enemies? Well, before we explore the answer to that question, make sure to leave a like rating on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Doing these three things will not only help out the channel, but it'll also help you become part of our community. And as a thank you for doing that, here's a picture of a baby monkey. Now, back to the topic at hand. If we were suddenly transported back to World War III, our main objective would be to try and blend in as much as possible. After all, if people knew that we weren't from that time period, there's a good chance that we would get captured and exploited for our knowledge of the future. To avoid this, we would want to find clothing that matched the time period and try to act as though nothing was out of the ordinary. After successfully blending in, we would then need to figure out what resources were available to us and how we could use them to help out the Allies. For example, if we were born into a time where horses were still being used, we could use this to our advantage by training horses and teaching people how to ride them more efficiently. We could also use our knowledge of the future to help develop better weapons or strategies that could be used against the enemy. However, despite our best efforts, there's still a good chance that we would eventually be found out. After all, there's only so long you can keep a secret before someone figures it out. But if we played our cards right, maybe we could convince people that we were actually from the future and use this to our advantage. For example, if we were able to show people advanced technology that they had never seen before, it might convince them that we are from the future. If we were able to convince even just a small group of people, we could use their help to spread the word and eventually gain the trust of the entire community. However, this would be easier said than done. The reason why is because throughout history, people rarely accepted new ideas without resistance. Even if we were able to prove that we were from the future, it would be difficult to convince people to listen to our warnings about the future and take action accordingly. Unfortunately, this has been proven true time and time again. For example, there have been numerous cases of scientists and experts warning the public about the dangers of climate change. Despite all the evidence, many people still choose to ignore the problem and carry on as usual. The same thing can be said about wars. Throughout history, there have been countless examples of leaders and experts warning the public about the dangers of war, yet they often fall on deaf ears. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence, People often prefer to remain ignorant and continue with business as usual until it's too late. This is unfortunate, but it's also the reality of the situation. In the end, even if we were to travel back in time to World War II, there's no guarantee that we would be able to convince people to listen to our warnings. Despite our best efforts, the outcome of the war may very well be decided by factors beyond our control. If we were actually to find ourselves in a situation like this, it would be important to remember that every decision we make will have a ripple effect on the future. For example, if we decided to join the war effort, our actions could potentially alter the outcome of the war and change history as we know it. On the other hand, if we chose to remain neutral, we could risk angering both sides and putting ourselves in danger. Ultimately, the decision of whether or not to get involved would be a difficult one with far-reaching consequences. It would be important to carefully weigh the risks and benefits of each option before making a decision. It would also be crucial to remain flexible and adapt to the changing circumstances as the war progressed. No matter what decision we made, it would undoubtedly be a challenging and dangerous situation to be in. The best course of action would be to stay informed, assess the risks and benefits of each option, and be prepared to adapt to changing circumstances. By doing so, we would be able to make the best possible decision for ourselves and hopefully contribute to the greater good. Ultimately, though, it's up to each individual to decide what they would do in such a situation. There is no right or wrong answer, and everyone will have to face the consequences of their decisions. Regardless of what we choose to do, one thing is certain: our lives would never be the same again. So, what do you think? What would you do if you were suddenly transported back to World War II? Would you join the Allies and fight against the Axis powers? Or would you try to remain neutral and hope for the best? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're at it, make sure to leave a like rating and subscribe if you haven't already. Doing these 3 things will not only help out the channel, but it'll also help you become part of our community. And as a thank you for doing that, here's a picture of a baby monkey.